A pleasure to be here in the airport, and also want to really start by saying that as Americans continue to get vaccinated and the pandemic restrictions ease, it's clear that more people are returning to personal domestic travel. In fact, this past Sunday, May 23rd, TSA saw the highest passenger volume since the pandemic began, with more than 1.8 million passengers screened. That day, this past Sunday, TSA screened 7 times more passengers than it did on the same day in 2020. Sunday's travel volume represents 90% of the volume screened on the same day in 2019, of course, before the pandemic began. It's really fantastic to see people traveling again to visit friends and family across the country. It's a positive sign that our nation is beginning to recover from this most challenging pandemic. Ensuring the safety and security of the traveling public is, of course, our top priority in the Department of Homeland Security and the Transportation Security Administration specifically. And while the CDC guidance is clear that fully vaccinated people are safe to travel, the federal government still requires the traveling public to wear a mask on planes, buses, trains, and other forms of public transportation. This is a federal mandate, and it is based on a CDC order, which applies to those traveling into, within, or out of the United States and in U.S. transportation hubs such as airports and stations. In consultation with the CDC and the Department of Transportation, we continuously reevaluate these federal requirements, but the federal requirements that I just articulated are those that are in place today. I want to take a moment to highlight the tremendous work of the men and women of TSA who made this past Sunday's travel so successful for the traveling American public, and who do tremendous work each and every day. I'd also like, if I may, to take a moment to recognize Darby LaJoy, from whom you'll hear in a minute, who's doing an extraordinary job in leading TSA during this time of transition, and as we head into a summer which we hope will see a tremendous reemergence of domestic travel and the economic prosperity that travel brings. Also, in speaking of the TSA workforce, we must keep in mind that they've been on the front lines throughout this past year, throughout the challenging pandemic, with a tremendous commitment to duty and to mission. I also want to recognize and commend our partners with whom we have a tremendous working relationship. We are all in this together to make sure that the American public can travel across the United States safely and securely and have a wonderful traveling experience. And our partners and friends are represented by the individuals seated behind me, from whom you'll hear in a moment. We in the department and in TSA are very committed to continuing to inform the American public about the mandate with respect to masks, the requirements that will ensure the safe and secure travel of the American public, and keep them informed of our reevaluation of the public health landscape and what is in their best interest and in all our best interests to both be able to maximize travel, to be able to see friends and family, and to stay safe. Thank you so much.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us today. I'm proud to be addressing you all from this very room where nearly 20 years ago TSA was signed into law, and here we are again at TSA, poised to support the traveling public as we embark on what is going to be an historic return to post-pandemic travel. I'd like to start by thanking today, and in no small part, resulted in our ability to be able to keep the traveling public safe and secure as we begin this summer. I'd also like to thank you, Secretary Mayorkas, for your words and for being here today. At TSA, our employees are our greatest asset, and I appreciate you taking the time to recognize their contributions. We're going to expect a very, very busy summer. Many of you have been reporting on what has been an historic pent-up demand for travel. We've certainly seen that throughout the spring, and we will continue to see a very steady increase as we approach the summer travel season. As vaccinations continue to rise and confidence continues to build, the nation's planes, trains, buses, and roads are going to be heavily traveled. We continue to coordinate with the CDC and other federal partners to ensure the health and safety of travelers, as well as all the employees that stand ready to support the return to travel this summer. This summer, many passengers will be traveling for the first time since the pandemic began and may be unfamiliar with some of the current technology and procedures. But before I get into some travel best practices, I want to talk a bit more about the upcoming summer travel period. We have already seen a sharp rise at the nation's airports and will continue to experience steady increases throughout the summer. Many airports have already returned or exceeded to 2019 pre-pandemic levels. As the Secretary mentioned, this past Sunday, May 23rd, we saw the highest travel throughput since the pandemic began, with 1.87 million travelers screened. This is 90% of the throughput as compared to the same day in 2019. As expected, airports are recovering at different rates, some faster than others, and many, as I mentioned, have already returned or exceeded to levels seen since the pandemic began. And just as passenger volume is increasing, so too will wait times throughout your travel experience. We've anticipated this, and as we do every single summer, began a massive hiring campaign this past winter. Since January, TSA has hired over 3,000 employees. Between now and the 4th of July, we expect to hire 1,000 more, and as we approach Labor Day, we'll meet or exceed our goal of 6,000 officers to staff the nation's airports. I'm confident in reporting that TSA is prepared and well-positioned to help ensure that everyone who wishes to travel will do so safely and securely. Next, I'd like to talk about how passengers who are traveling for the first time since before the pandemic began can prepare for upcoming trips and assist in making the process go much more smoothly. First, consider enrolling in TSA PreCheck for a more streamlined travel experience. PreCheck passengers spend less time waiting in line and do not need to remove shoes, laptops, liquids, belts, or light jackets for screening. Enrolling in PreCheck takes 5 minutes online, followed by a quick in-person appointment at any one of over 400 enrollment centers across the United States. Most travelers are approved within 5 days, and membership lasts for 5 years. All passengers should plan to arrive early enough at the airport to give yourself plenty of time to make it through security in the entire travel process. Wear a mask. They are still required at airports and throughout the public transportation system, regardless of vaccination status or local or state ordinance. Be prepared for the security checkpoint to look a little bit different than you remember. We've added thousands of acrylic barriers and new touchless screening technology to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. Social distancing measures are still in place, and we are doing everything we can to ensure waiting areas do not get too crowded. Be sure to bring proper identification and have it out and ready at the checkpoint. Not doing so simply slows down the process. Note that some checkpoints will have new machines now that allow passengers to scan their own ID rather than handing it to an officer. These machines, called Credential Authentication Technology, or CAT, have been deployed at airports throughout the country and provide a more efficient and secure identity document verification process. As always, Liquids, gels, and aerosols are limited to 3.4-ounce bottles that fit into a 1-quart size bag, and it should be removed from your carry-on for screening. However, we are allowing liquid hand sanitizer up to 12 ounces per passenger in carry-on bags. Please note that passengers no longer need to take food out of their carry-on bags for screening, but keeping your carry-on bag uncluttered may lead to fewer bag checks and a shorter wait time. All of these procedures are in place to help keep you safe. I want to take a moment to emphasize our security requirements when traveling with firearms. Firearms are only allowed in checked baggage and must be properly packaged and declared with your airline prior to your arrival. Despite the drastic reduction in passengers throughout 2020, there were more than 3,000 firearms discovered at TSA checkpoints during the same year. This is double the rate as the year previous. This is an alarming trend, and while most passengers claim they simply forgot the gun was in their bag, it represents a clear threat to public safety, especially when we consider that nearly 90% of these firearms were loaded. If you bring a firearm to a checkpoint, even by accident, you cause significant disruptions to the entire security process and put the public, law enforcement, TSA employees, and other airport and airline personnel at risk. It's important to note that for these firearm violations, we may seek a penalty of nearly $14,000 per violation, and your pre-check status could also be in jeopardy. In addition to firearms at our checkpoints, we have seen incidents on board planes and within airports where passengers are increasingly becoming agitated, even unruly, often violent. Since we've issued the TSA directives requiring masks in public transportation, we have initiated over 1,300 compliance investigations. Additionally, there have been more than 60 incidents involving TSA employees being physically assaulted, to include a rise in assaults on board the aircraft against flight crew. We want to be clear that anyone causing a disturbance on board an aircraft or within the airport environment will be punished with fines and possible criminal charges. TSA and FAA work closely together to ensure that non-compliant individuals will face maximum civil day, and in no small part resulted in our ability to be able to keep the traveling public safe and secure as we begin this summer. I'd also like to thank you, Secretary Mayorkas, for your words and for being here today. At TSA, our employees are our greatest asset, and I appreciate you taking the time to recognize their contributions. We're going to expect a very, very busy summer. Many of you have been reporting on what has been an historic pent-up demand for travel. We've certainly seen that throughout the spring, and we will continue to see a very steady increase as we approach the summer travel season. As vaccinations continue to rise and confidence continues to build, the nation's planes, trains, buses, and roads are going to be heavily traveled. We continue to coordinate with the CDC and other federal partners to ensure the health and safety of travelers, as well as all the employees that stand ready to support the return to travel this summer. This summer, many passengers will be traveling for the first time since the pandemic began and may be unfamiliar with some of the current technology and procedures. But before I get into some travel best practices, I want to talk a bit more about the upcoming summer travel period. We have already seen a sharp rise at the nation's airports and will continue to experience steady increases throughout the summer. Many airports have already returned or exceeded to 2019 pre-pandemic levels. As the Secretary mentioned, this past Sunday, May 23rd, we saw the highest travel throughput since the pandemic began, with 1.87 million travelers screened. This is 90% of the throughput as compared to the same day in 2019. As expected, airports are recovering at different rates, some faster than others, and many, as I mentioned, have already returned or exceeded to levels seen since the pandemic began. And just as passenger volume is increasing, so too will wait times throughout your travel experience. We've anticipated this, and as we do every single summer, began a massive hiring campaign this past winter. Since January, TSA has hired over 3,000 employees. Between now and the 4th of July, we expect to hire 1,000 more. And as we approach Labor Day, we'll meet or exceed our goal of 6,000 officers to staff the nation's airports. I'm confident in reporting that TSA is prepared and well-positioned to help ensure that everyone who wishes to travel will do so safely and securely. Next, I'd like to talk about how passengers who are traveling for the first time since before the pandemic began can prepare for upcoming trips and assist in making the process go much more smoothly. First, consider enrolling in TSA PreCheck for a more streamlined travel experience. PreCheck passengers spend less time waiting in line and do not need to remove shoes, laptops, liquids, belts, or light jackets for screening. Enrolling in PreCheck takes 5 minutes online, followed by a quick in-person appointment at any one of over 400 enrollment centers across the United States. Most travelers are approved within 5 days, and membership lasts for 5 years. All passengers should plan to arrive early enough at the airport to give yourself plenty of time to make it through security in the entire travel process. Wear a mask. They are still required at airports and throughout the public transportation system, regardless of vaccination status or local or state ordinance. Be prepared for the security checkpoint to look a little bit different than you remember. We've added thousands of acrylic barriers and new touchless screening technology to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. Social distancing measures are still in place, and we are doing everything we can to ensure waiting areas do not get too crowded. Be sure to bring proper identification and have it out and ready at the checkpoint. Not doing so simply slows down the process. Note that some checkpoints will have new machines now that allow passengers to scan their own ID rather than handing it to an officer. These machines, called Credential Authentication Technology, or CAT, have been deployed at airports throughout the country and provide a more efficient and secure identity document verification process. As always, liquids, gels, and aerosols are limited to 3.4-ounce bottles that fit into a 1-quart size bag and should be removed from your carry-on for screening. However, we are allowing liquid hand sanitizer up to 12 ounces per passenger in carry-on bags. Please note that passengers no longer need to take food out of their carry-on bags for screening, but keeping your carry-on bag uncluttered may lead to fewer bag checks and a shorter wait time. All of these procedures are in place to help keep you safe. I want to take a moment to emphasize our security requirements when traveling with firearms. Firearms are only allowed in checked baggage and must be properly packaged and declared with your airline prior to your arrival. Despite the drastic reduction in passengers throughout 2020, there were more than 3,000 firearms discovered at TSA checkpoints during the same year. This is double the rate as the year previous. This is an alarming trend, and while most passengers claim they simply forgot the gun was in their bag, it represents a clear threat to public safety, especially when we consider that nearly 90% of these firearms were loaded. If you bring a firearm to a checkpoint, even by accident, you cause significant disruption to the entire security process and put the public, law enforcement, TSA employees, and other airport and airline personnel at risk. It's important to note that for these firearm violations, we may seek a penalty of nearly $14,000 per violation, and your pre-check status could also be in jeopardy. In addition to firearms at our checkpoints, we have seen incidents on board planes and within airports where passengers are increasingly becoming agitated, even unruly, often violent. Since we've issued the TSA directives requiring masks in public transportation, we have initiated over 1,300 compliance investigations. Additionally, there have been more than 60 incidents involving TSA employees being physically assaulted, to include a rise in assaults on board the aircraft against flight crew. We want to be clear that anyone causing a disturbance on board an aircraft or within the airport environment will be punished with fines and possible criminal charges. TSA and FAA work closely together to ensure that non-compliant individuals will face maximum civil penalties as appropriate. Similar to firearm violations, individuals assaulting a TSA employee are subject to criminal charges and a maximum civil penalty of almost $14,000. Keep in mind that transportation security officers and transportation workers throughout the entire system have been working throughout this pandemic to keep the traveling public safe. Please be patient with them and show them the courtesy and respect they deserve. Together, we can make travel experience go smoothly and ensure that everyone reaches their destinations safely this summer. In closing, I want to thank all of our airline, airport, and industry partners once again for their continued collaboration and support during this unprecedented time. Your partnership has been invaluable to raising awareness and restoring the public's confidence in the safety of air travel. I also want to take a moment to recognize and thank the TSA workforce. Our TSOs, our federal air marshals, our canine handlers, our inspectors, and all the support staff here in the United States and around the world. They have stood firm and fulfilled their duties with resilience and professionalism, and I am proud to serve and support each and every one of them. I also want to thank the American people for doing your part, for following the rules, for wearing a mask and socially distancing to the extent possible. Thank you for trusting TSA, DHS, and our partners in helping keep you safe and secure when you travel.
Good morning. I'm Nick Callio with Airlines for America. Thank you, Secretary Mayorkas and Acting Administrator LaJoy, for your partnership and your leadership. We're pleased to be here with you today and with our industry partners. It's great to be here in person at the airport. It's about time. And there's been a significant change in just a very short period of time in the number of people who are now flying again. It's great to see it. It's happened very, very quickly. This past year was incredibly difficult. We all know that. It was clearly the most challenging year in aviation history. Just a year ago, flying was down 96% year over year. It's back up now. We're running at about probably 35%. And we're thrilled to see it. People coming into the airport, checking their bags, going through the TSA checkpoints, going to the gates and boarding airplanes. Americans want to get out. They really do. Vaccinations are up. COVID cases are down significantly, and there's a lot of pent-up demand to travel, as the acting administrator referenced. It's not surprising. This year we learned a lot about firsthand relationships or in-person relationships. You can't walk on the beach or hug your grandchild or look somebody in the eye when you're doing it over your computer. We also learned a lot about the safety of flying over the past year. The Harvard School of Public Health, with the Aviation Public Health Initiative, did a project looking at the entire in-flight experience. The conclusion, looking at all the science and all the data, was that flying is as safe, if not safer, than other routine activities like going to the grocery store or eating in a restaurant. I encourage you to read more at airlines.org. Even as demand for domestic leisure travel is increasing, we're not out of the woods yet. The revenues are still down. We have incurred significant losses over the last year, and we're continuing to lose money. There's great hope within the industry that maybe by the end of the year we can start to break even. We need to open up business travel, and we need to open up international markets. That's where most of the revenue is, and that revenue subsidizes a great number of our domestic flights. So, working with our government partners and our industry partners, we plan to try to make that happen on a safe basis. As I conclude, I want to share 3 tips with everyone to fly healthy and fly smart. First of all, remember your face covering. It's still a mandate. It's still necessary. You see the signs on the airport. You hear from the TSA agents, the gate agents, the flight attendants, and the pilots. Just go with it. It's still safer. It's a significant layer of risk mitigation that helps when you're on an airplane and in the airport. Also, utilize touchless technology. There's a lot that's happened over the last year. The trend was on their way already, but it makes it a lot easier for you to do things safely. And finally, allow a little extra time for your flight. It's hard to remember or forget those days just a few months ago when you could get to the airport pretty late and get through on time. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Kevin Burke, my friend Sand from Airports Council International. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Nick. It's great to be here with everybody. And let me tell you, as somebody who's been in front of a screen for the last 14 months looking at colleagues, it's nice to be in front of real people, looking out at an airport, actually seeing planes take off or landing, which means that things are moving forward. We, too, appreciate the close partnership with DHS, TSA, all of our government partners, and with my colleagues who are behind me today. Working together in this crisis is the only way we're going to get through this crisis as a united industry. And in the 40 or so years I've been in Washington, I've never seen a group, an industry, get behind an issue working with government on probably the worst pandemic that we've seen in our lifetimes. So these partnerships, in our view, are essential as we meet the challenges that have been presented us over the last 14 months. I think the most stunning number, folks, is the fact that this time last year we were at 340,000 people going through TSA checkpoints. We're up to almost 2 million, and as of Sunday, my guess is as we get into the summer months, those numbers will increase. That means Americans want to travel. They want to get out of their basements, they want to get out of their offices, they want to come to places like Reagan National and fly to destinations. That's what we want, that's what we see. However, and the airports are ready. We are absolutely ready for this travel. In pre-pandemic, we're handling between 2.4 and 2.6 million passengers a day just here in the United States. That doesn't include our membership in Canada. But we always come back to one point. The responsibility of the airports, working with our partners, is the health, safety, and security of the traveling public and the airport workers who work here at Reagan and other airports around the country. Since the beginning of this pandemic, airports responded swiftly, taking aggressive measures to contain the spread and protect the traveling public, our tenants, and our employees. Without a healthy employee base, without healthy tenants, we're nowhere. Nobody's going to argue with this point. The last 14 months, for all of us in this industry, have been tremendously stressful. To date, as we've heard before, our passenger numbers are still down. We're on our way back, but we're about 49% of where we were in 2019. And as the Secretary said, as Nick has said, that recovery has been a little bit unbalanced. Some airports are doing better than others, but the reality is we need to get passengers back in airports, back in planes. Our domestic travel has been up, which we're happy about. Business travel is not up. We're hopeful that's coming back soon, but we need to resume international travel, which requires our government to work with other governments to find ways in which we can open up markets safely for our folks in the United States to travel to Europe and Asia, and for those folks in those continents to come back here to the United States. Despite all these challenges, I am proud to say that airports have helped to limit the spread of COVID-19 by implementing what we call a multi-layer approach to health and safety. First, by enhancing cleaning and sanitation regimens at all airports. I would argue that America's airports have never been cleaner than they are today. And that's a good thing, because that will remain a process for all airports as we move forward. We've upgraded ventilation systems and air handling systems within all our airports. We've encouraged, where we can, physical distancing and mask wearing. In some airports, you can't have the spread of folks that we've had in the past based upon space requirements. We have, as we've mentioned earlier, we're implementing new contactless technologies. So the travel of the future will not have to touch anything. And that technology is here, and that's the future of airports, that's the future of air travel. Those efforts moving forward are working to reduce the spread of COVID-19, as Nick had mentioned in the Harvard University study that was put out earlier this year. Again, that study solidified the need for the entire aviation industry to work in tandem to make certain that people get back to traveling again. We can't do it without collaboration with our government partners, with our folks at DHS, TSA, FAA, CBP, CDC, all the folks here on the stage today are important partners. Without, it's like a car engine. If one cylinder isn't working, the engine doesn't work real well. Right now, we're firing on all cylinders as an industry, as a collective industry. So our close working relationship, which is exhibited today, has to move forward if we see this recovery moving forward. But for those who are planning summer travel, and there seems to be more and more of them every day planning trips, your journey is going to look just a little bit different than it's done in the past. And all of us have seen it in the airports here, the protective measures that we all taken. But I'm going to repeat some of the helpful hints that Darby had mentioned, because we work very closely with Darby and his team, because I think they're worth repeating. First of all, wear a mask like we're doing today. I would much prefer to be speaking with you folks without a mask on, and you'd much prefer listening to me without a mask on, but wear the masks in these facilities. It's going to be, it still remains to be required. Maintain physical distance wherever possible. That will help the spread of the disease. Pack with patience. And what do I mean by that? Please be courteous to the TSA officers and the airport staff, the airport personnel, the airline personnel, and your fellow passengers. Because at the end of the day, these people are there to protect you. They're there to help make your travel experience good, and being impatient is not going to help anybody. Enroll in TSA PreCheck. And Darby, this is a push for TSA PreCheck, because that's the way we're going to move forward on PreCheck. Plan ahead. Airports have websites that will tell you when to come to the airport. We have some airports in the United States that have algorithms that will tell you when to line up for your TSA checkpoint, so you're not standing in line for a long time. You can keep social distancing. Pack smart. And as Darby had said before, consult the TSA website on what you can pack and carry on. Many people don't know what those requirements are, and it will make your experience that much better if you know what you can or can't bring in a plane. And last but not least, and I'm going to repeat this because Darby did, firearms cannot go in your carry-on bags. So also, as during this pandemic, make sure that you're eventually Real ID ready. Secretary Mayorkas announced a couple of weeks ago extending the Real ID deadline till May of 2023, which allows American citizens who travel a longer opportunity to get Real ID, which in fact will make the travel experience safer for all involved. So my recommendation is do it now. The Department of Motor Vehicles are beginning to open back up, and that's where you're going to get it done. So in closing here, I want to thank our friends, all of our partners, for all the hard work they've been doing over the past 14 to 15 months. We're not out of the woods yet, folks, but we are well beyond where we were this time last year. So thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions later.
Good morning. I'm George Novak, President and CEO of the National Air Carrier Association. Mr. Secretary, Mr. Acting Administrator, members of the press, fellow colleagues, thank you for putting this all together today, and we're really looking forward to this upcoming summer travel season as we go into the Memorial Day weekend. That sound of jets that you hear on the runway, that's the sound of recovery. And that's a sound that's music to all of our ears, whether we're in the industry or whether we're families traveling. So to the traveling public, welcome back. It's been a long time coming. From our 19 air carriers, from our low-cost, ultra-low-cost carriers who are among those speeding the recovery, to our charter carriers as well as our employees, we're looking forward to having you and your families back on our aircraft. As we have during the pandemic, we're continuing our work to ensure the safest and most secure travel experience available to everyone. And we'd like to thank our partners, which we've been in close consultation with, the CDC, TSA, DHS, and FAA. Our airline employees continue to conduct extensive efforts to ensure the cabin is sanitized and ready for your arrival. Advanced air filtration systems on board all aircraft in the industry have been proven to drastically reduce the spread of contaminants, including COVID-19. Thanks to these efforts, we're getting close to pre-pandemic levels of domestic and international travel. Although, as Nick noted, we're not there yet. So if you've not traveled in a while, there are a few key things to keep in mind, and I'm not going to go through them all again, but it's very simple. Mask. Travel is going to look a lot different for everybody than it has pre-pandemic. And remember crowds. For all of us, that's going to be a change in what we've done. It's just remembering what it's like to be among a crowd of people is going to be something which is going to require just remembering how you act. And with that, I'd like to highlight the significant uptick in disruptive passengers aboard aircraft, which has shockingly included instances of actual physical assaults against members of the crew and flight attendants. The FAA and the industry have instituted a zero-tolerance policy in prosecuting any individual that does not follow flight crew instructions or becomes physically abusive. We support the FAA, DHS, TSA, all of our partners 100% in this effort. Our flight crews are there for your safety and the safety of fellow passengers, your family, and the public. They are protecting you, your family, and your fellow passengers, and we must show them the proper respect and understanding as we resume travel. Mr. Secretary, the National Air Carrier Association and our 19 carriers, thank you for this opportunity to share our message with the traveling public, and we look forward to seeing everybody back in the skies. We cannot wait. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Roger Dow, and I head up the U.S. Travel Association, and we represent all parts of the travel industry: airports, airlines, hotels, theme parks, and most important, the 83% of small businesses that depend on travel. This time last year, fully half of the 16 million travel industry employees were out of a job. Even today, as I stand here, almost 2/3 of all of our unemployment is in the travel industry in the United States, yet travel is 1 in 10 employees. Everyone's talking today about the rebound of domestic leisure travel, which is very, very encouraging. To put in perspective, we just did a Harris poll, and Americans say that 77% of them are ready to take a vacation this summer. Put that in perspective, last year it was 29%, so almost a factor of 3. The interesting part, and Darby mentioned this, is 53% of them have not taken one trip since March. So we've got a whole lot of travelers that are just itching to get out there. It's tremendous to see that people are getting back to travel this summer safely, and we've got one simple message to them, and that's be prepared, know before you go. Talk to your airlines, talk to your airports, talk to your destinations, talk to your hotels, because this thing is changing so fast and in a very positive way, and know what the requirements and policies are. I think it's also important that we have efficient travel, and it's been talked about biometric and technology, and I think that we're in a great place moving forward. And a little advanced knowledge is really going to go a long, long way in getting you to be able to travel more. But we're still not out of the woods, as has been mentioned. The all-important business travel and international travel have not come back, and we need to bring them back because they represent, to put in perspective, 41% of all travel is international and business travel, meetings and events. To put that in perspective, we lost $1.1 trillion of business that we could bring back as we work together with the administration to bring back international travel, get policies to bring back business travel. I think the good news is, and today what we're here to talk about is summer travel is coming back domestically, and that's the really good news. And our message is very simple. Ready? We are. Let's go there. Thank you very much.
Well, you've reached the end of the line, and a lot of ground's already been covered, so I promise to be brief. My name's Joel Bacon. I'm Executive Vice President for Government and Public Affairs with the American Association of Airport Executives, and I'd like to begin by joining my colleagues in thanking Secretary Mayorkas, Acting Administrator LaJoy, Administrator Pekoski, and all the dedicated professionals of the Transportation Security Administration and DHS for the partnership and collaboration that we've had throughout the pandemic and as we prepare for Memorial Day and the upcoming summer travel season. Airports are proud of the role that we've taken collaboratively with our federal partners and the industry. Kevin walked through a lot of the individual steps that airports have taken to enhance public safety and health throughout their facilities. This has truly been a whole of government and industry approach to protect and enhance public health, and you see it throughout the airports, you see it at the checkpoint, you see it aboard the aircraft. Has been validated by the Harvard study that Nick mentioned. A lot of improvements have been made, and we're thrilled to see travelers returning to the skies. It's encouraging to hear the numbers that Darby has talked about. We're not quite there yet. The business travelers, the international travelers still have to come back, and we look forward to working with our federal partners and the industry to return that travel just as soon as we can safely and efficiently. If you've traveled recently, you've seen some of the changes that we've all talked about. You've seen the fact that masks are still required. You've seen the plexiglass barriers throughout the airport. You've seen the distancing. You've seen the touchless technology. You know that the airport facilities are cleaner and more sanitized than they've ever been before. If you haven't traveled recently, know that it's going to be a different travel experience. You may not have as many readily available options to get you to the airport. You're going to have a different experience at the checkpoint and when you check in, as we have all discussed today. But it's nothing that a little patience can't overcome. So my suggestion to everyone, echoing what's been said today, is pack your masks, pack your patience, pack a little extra time as you head to the airports this summer. Everything that's been undertaken has been undertaken with your public health and safety in mind. All of us in the industry and the government are eager to have you back at our facilities. Pack the patience, and we look forward to seeing you at the airport this summer. Thank you.
All right, with that, we will now open the floor to questions. Our Press Secretary, Sarah Rodriguez, will walk over to you with the microphone when it's your turn. Please remember, we are also taking questions from member of the media joining us virtually. My deputy, Jim Gregory, will be reading those questions, and please remember to state your name and outlet prior to asking your question. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Tom Costello with NBC News for Secretary Mayorkas. Mr. Secretary, we've had so many reports, and we just did a report this morning on the Today Show about the bad behavior, dangerous behavior exploding on airplanes. The FAA putting out new numbers again on this yesterday. The flight attendants saying they've never before faced a situation where day in and day out they're verbally or physically assaulted. I know that you talked about this, but I wonder if you could maybe drive down on this. What is causing this, and what can you do at Homeland Security to ensure that this behavior is not tolerated? Y también, si posible, decir un poco palabras en español también para noticias de Telemundo. Gracias.
So thanks so very much for the question. It's a very important one. You know, I would be speculating if I would identify the cause. I'm sure there is frustration as people resume travel and understand that the rules of travel have changed. But these are rules that are designed for their very protection, and so that we can ensure that the success that we enjoy today in traveling will actually be replicated in each and every day, and actually that travel will grow. We're addressing it quite forcefully. As has been articulated previously, we're not going to tolerate behavior that threatens the well-being of the public, the employees that bravely are on the front lines to facilitate the travel for individuals who want to reunite with friends and family. And so the consequence regime is in place. It will be enforced, and it will be enforced appropriately to meet the moment and to give the opportunities for others to resume travel. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Secretary, Dave Shepardson from Reuters. Two questions for you. You just last week extended the travel restrictions at the Canada and Mexico borders by another 30 days. Can you talk to us about the roadmap or the blueprint you see for unwinding the travel restrictions at both the Canada and Mexico border, as well as the 212F restrictions that prevent people from coming here from the European Union, the UK, and other places?
So I think, thank you for that. As a number of people, I think everyone has articulated, we can't overstate the importance of resuming travel of all types, business travel, international travel, to really spur the economic recovery. At the same time, we have a responsibility to ensure the public safety. And we are following the facts, the data, the science in making the decision as to when business international travel actually can resume. And there was important new language in the most recent extension about our work with Canada and our international partners in evaluating the landscape where we can achieve the economic prosperity and at the same time address the public health imperative. This is something that we are evaluating each and every day. And what we're going to do is we're going to follow the science in making the appropriate decision for the American public.
I'd just like to add to what the Secretary has said. U.S. Travel, together with the airline associations, 23 CEOs put out a letter to the President saying we must look at opening up safely international travel and look at the UK corridor, which will be very important. They're far along and we need to work together. Canada is very important. It's over 25 million travelers to the U.S. But if we get international open, we open up the rest of our economy, and it's so critical. And I applaud Secretary Mayorkas and Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo has been fabulous and really pushing forward to open international safely and smartly. Thank you.
Just to follow up, ACINA also represents Canadian airports, and the Canadian airports have been devastated across the board. They're down about 90% still. There are regions of Canada where there is no air service at all. Resumption of travel between the United States and Canada is critical. And I agree with the Secretary, we have to go by the science. But there are Canadians who can't come to the U.S., we can't go to Canada. They're the second largest trading partner with us other than the EU. So therefore, the quicker we get it done, the better, but obviously it has to be safely. But there are regions of Canada where they can't even travel between their provinces. So unlike the United States, which has been able to rebound, the Canadian airports and the Canadian airlines have not done as well. So we look forward to working with the administration and the Canadian government, which we have worked with for years, to try to come up with a solution, and sooner than later that we can resume this type of travel.
Hello, Karen Walker, Air Transport World and Aviation Week. Everybody keeps talking about masks and the concern about disruptive behaviour, but isn't there obviously going to be more confusion now that the CDC is recommending people cannot wear masks? So isn't that where we're going to see a lot of the problems at airports and on planes?
Let me be clear in underscoring something. It is a federal mandate that one must wear a mask in an airport, in the modes of public transportation, on the aircraft itself, and we will not tolerate behavior that violates the law, violates the guidance, and especially behavior that is assaultive to the individuals who are trying to protect the American public and allow them to enjoy the resumption of travel safely and securely.
Hi, I'm Claudia Seda.
Can I just add one thing to that? You know, the airlines imposed a mask requirement before it was a federal mandate. We enforced it in many cases by prohibiting people from flying who violated it. That stays in place. It's a mandate. Again, I think we kind of all need to get over it. You know it's a mandate, wear the mask, and it'll all be over soon.
Is that a violation for life? Are you going to be paying for life of flying? Do you violate that rule and you assault a crew member?
Tom, that's up to the individual airlines. I think in many cases it will be.
Claudia Seda with Univision Network for Secretary Mayorkas. Talking about bad behavior, you're cracking it down. Can you tell us what happens if a foreigner behaves bad on an airplane? I know there are penalties, but can something happen to the visa? Can it be suspended? And also, now that the summer is coming, how are you preparing for high volume of activity at the south border? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part of your question, but let me just say that for individuals who violate the law, especially when it jeopardizes so much that we have invested in on behalf of the American people, to allow them to resume travel, to really re-engage and re-energize our economy, to re-emerge in a prosperous environment, will bring the full force of the law to bear.
This next question comes from Luke Barr of ABC News, who is attending virtually. He asks, the Colonial Pipeline exposed a serious cyber infrastructure flaw. Are you concerned that more of these attacks will keep happening? And is there nothing the government can do to prevent private companies from getting hacked?
So a subject different than travel and the reemergence of domestic travel in the summertime. I have spoken well before the Colonial Pipeline cyber attack, that ransomware is one of the greatest cybersecurity threats that we face in the United States. It's why we began a 60-day sprint in the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency to focus the American public on this threat, to focus American businesses' energies on this threat. And we are working very closely in a public-private partnership to inform the American business landscape, its participants, to equip them with the information they need to increase their cyber hygiene and to be able to not only prevent these attacks, but to respond to them ably and effectively to establish the resilience of the business community.
We have one more from the virtual audience, and it is about masks. When do you expect mask mandates to go away at airports and on airplanes?
Not sure why I leave the lectern.
You want a chair?
We are going to release the mandate when the science and the data establishes that that is in the best interest of the American public's health. And we are working as quickly as possible to see that day. And I cannot encourage too much those in the American public who have not yet vaccinated themselves and seen to the vaccination of their loved ones to do so immediately. That is the best ticket to all of our public health and the reemergence of travel in the fullest way possible, to include business travel, to include international travel, and really to reemerge in the most prosperous way. Thank you.